intimacy on the radio and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another stupendous installment from very high above all the bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. Back in our new studio. You know, I have to tell you, it is a little... Evidently, Agent 29 wants to say something.
No.
Anyway, my friends, we're back in the Cowboy State Politics studio after a quick break. Lou Grant, Agent 29, was down in Laramie. I don't exactly know what he was doing down there, playing hooky, not doing his job. I'm talking to college professors. How is the Ivory Tower, by the way?
Some of us have more than one job, David.
At least you claim to.
Yeah, the University of Wyoming was having their budget hearings in front of their board, and we were invited. So Representative Sherwood, Representative Smith, and I sat in and listened to all the requests for money. We'll get into that probably a little bit later.
Ah, okay. So you did accomplish something.
I don't know.
So
I went and listened.
Would you agree with me that
No.
My experience at the University of Wyoming, that wherever I walked, there was opulence? Would you think that that's an accurate portrayal?
Yeah, at the risk of stealing my own thunder for later in the show, you show me another community of 600,000 people, which is essentially what Wyoming is.
Yeah, one small town with long streets.
That is able to or willing to fund and take care of a facility like that. Absolutely world class everywhere you turn. Gorgeous artworks and almost, I think, 790 acres, immaculately groomed and cared for. They do a terrific job down there in that regard, but they spend a lot of money.
Well, I was going to say, they ought to do a terrific job with as much money as they have.
Yeah,
well, anyway.
Let's get back to that.
Anyway, so we're going to get to that a little bit later on in the program. I've got a little piece of audio from our own Agent 29. But on today's program, Donald Trump has done what I consider to be the most important thing in both presidencies, in either presidency, and it's one that is not going to get really any play whatsoever. I don't think that the media is going to pick it up, except, of course, for the Federalist, where I got this piece from. But it's extraordinarily important. And the reason I say that is on any given day, you commit about 3 felonies a day. And, of course, I'm referring to the book by Harvey Silverglate, in which he said that the average person, every single day of the week, when you get up, you leave your house, you've probably committed at least 3 felonies, and you don't even know about it. And the reason for it is there's just a morass of regulations that nobody really knows about and that you had no intent to violate.
I'm sure my rain barrel is a felony, right?
It actually is in some places.
Yeah.
And think about that, right?
And that's kind of the point of this, I think. I haven't read the book, but there are so many laws out there that you can't hardly function
Exactly
without
right.
doing something.
And, a good example of why I'm bringing this up is the farming family that was over in South Dakota. They had a fence that was, and I'm going to get the numbers all wrong, but just for the sake of argument, it was 3 or 4 feet off the property line. And their fence was actually sitting on federal land. Well, it had been that way for years. And this family really wasn't doing anything nefarious. They weren't stealing anybody's land. They were just operating their farm. Well, the federal government came in and they got hauled into court, spent a whole bunch of money, and Harriet Hageman got involved, and it was a big deal. But the point is that that family had no intent whatsoever to break any law. They weren't trying to do anything nefarious or anything, and yet, through really no fault of their own, except for the existence of a federal regulation, they were hauled into court. So Donald Trump has just made it harder for you to go to federal prison, and this is from the Federalist, and I quote, on Friday, President Trump issued a new executive order, which, by the way, I'm getting really sick of all these executive orders. It is not the job of the president to make law, and a lot of the things that he's doing, in my opinion, should go through Congress. While they may be within his purview, the proper place is in Congress. So anyway, new executive order with a remarkably broad scope and deep implications under the title of Fighting Over Criminalization in Federal Regulations. And it starts with clear, plain, and direct language. Quote, the Code of Federal Regulations contains over 48,000 sections, stretching over 175,000 pages, far more than any citizen could possibly ever read, let alone fully understand. Worse, many carry potential criminal penalties for violations. The situation has become so dire that no one, likely including those charged with enforcing our criminal laws at the Department of Justice, know how many separate criminal offenses are contained in the Code of Federal Regulations, with at least one source estimating that hundreds of thousands of such crimes. Many of these regulatory crimes are just strict liability offenses, meaning that citizens don't need to have a guilty mental state to be convicted of a crime. The status quo is absurd and unjust. It allows the executive branch to write the law in addition to executing it. That situation can lend itself to abuse and weaponization by providing government officials tools to target unwitting individuals. It privileges large corporations, which can afford to hire expensive legal teams to navigate complex regulatory schemes and fence out new market entrants over average Americans. So essentially, what the Trump administration is doing is that they're just going to say, we're not going to enforce all these things. More specifically, it is the policy of the United States that criminal enforcement of criminal regulatory offenses is disfavored. That's the language that the executive order uses, while adding that agencies promulgating regulations potentially subject to criminal enforcement should explicitly describe the conduct subject to criminal enforcement, the authorizing statutes, and the mens rea, or the state of mind. Mens rea actually means guilty mind. Standard applicable to those offenses. So the reason I say that this is the most important thing that he has done thus far, is it is one of those things that directly affects your liberty, your freedom to act as an individual, and it addresses the importance of having intent in our criminal laws. You shouldn't be held accountable for violating a law that you didn't even know was there. I mean, legitimately, right? Ignorance of the law is not really an excuse, but in the case of the federal statutes, it absolutely could be, because you have no idea that you're violating a law. Hence the book, 3 Felonies a Day. What do you think, Ken?
I have a real problem with it.
Okay.
We are a nation of laws.
Yes.
The law is the law. If the law is a bad law, the law needs to be changed, repealed, whatever it is. This really isn't different. It's just the other side of the coin. It's a two-edged sword. From Joe Biden saying we're not going to enforce immigration law. You pick certain laws and say we're just not going to enforce them. We have set that precedent so that anybody that comes in is able to shove those things aside and say, okay, it's the law, but we don't care.
Do bureaucrats get to write laws?
In effect, yes.
So, first of all, a law has to be passed by Congress, right? You guys write these laws all the time that says the agency shall promulgate rules.
Well, they get written in the halls of the legislature. I don't.
Well, so my point is that the federal code is replete with 175,000 pages of regulations that most of which never went through Congress, most of which never had the approval of the president, aside from just the stupid language that says the agency shall promulgate rules.
Yeah.
And a lot of those. Let me give you a great example. One that I think that you would agree with. The ATF. They pass rules all the time. That any part of a gun is now a gun. Is that true?
See, now you're fundamentally making my point for me. Is that we have unelected bureaucrats making rules with the force of law, and that's a problem. Now, in Wyoming, we are working to reverse that by saying that any rules that are promulgated by these agencies have to be verified or approved by the legislature, which effectively means now the legislature is codifying that law.
Well, here's where I'm getting at is that that all of these agencies, and you can pick any of them from the alphabet soup that you want, but the federal government, the FBI, the ATF, the DHS, all of those are under the purview of the executive branch. All of them are executive branch agencies. And in the state of Wyoming, it works the same way. Any of these agencies are all under the executive branch. And when you have an agency that is promulgating rules, they are literally executing the language that's in that law that was passed by Congress. So it says the agency shall promulgate rules. Okay, that's under the purview of the executive branch. So the head of the executive branch in the state is Go Green Governor Gordon. The head of the executive branch at the federal level is the president.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the Federal Register and the I guess the breadth of all of these regulations, really it's a question of executing the law through regulations. And so, I mean, that's where they get around it with this executive
Well, yeah.
order.
That's why it's called the executive branch, because the legislature makes the laws, they execute the laws. The problem is, as I've been trying to say, the muddying of the waters, the separation, the delegation. What happens all too often to legislatures, and especially where we have a part-time citizen legislature like we do in Wyoming, is we abdicate a lot of our responsibilities and we pawn it off on these agencies, and we allow them to do it and never go back and look and see what kind of a mess that we've made.
And actually, you just hit on exactly where I was going next. That the legislative branch has ceded much of their authority to the executive branch, and we do this in a number of ways. One of those is the one I keep mentioning, that the agency shall promulgate rules. The other one of those is through funding. One of the big tools of the House of Representatives, both at the federal level and at the state level, is they control the purse strings of all of these agencies. So, in a perfect world, the agency XYZ will come to the legislature and they say, we need $1 million for our budget next year. And this is what we're going to do with the $1 million that we're asking for, and this is how we're going to use it. And then the legislature decides, well, yes, no, maybe you only get $650,000, but here's the money. And then the House of Representatives has oversight over that department. But both at the federal level and at the state level, what happens often, hopefully not anymore, at least for the next year anyway, is that agencies are taken off book. And what I mean by that is their budget is taken out of the budgetary process and set up with independent funding, whether it be through statute or a trust fund or a trust fund. I guess both of those are kind of through statute. But in Wyoming, what they do is they set up this big trust fund, a coffee can, and they dump $50 million into it. And then the agency, whatever it is to operate off of the interest from that trust fund. And so many of these agencies, they never even have to show their face in the Capitol building. They just continually get funded in perpetuity, and there's no oversight whatsoever.
Yeah, they're effectively on autopilot. And
Yeah.
I used that phrase several times during the session. The last thing we want to do is fund something that way where we are no longer doing our job, we the legislature. And you're absolutely right. We have abdicated much of our responsibility because we don't have time. Government has gotten so big and so broad that nobody can keep up.
Exactly right. And that is exactly the point in this executive order. When we come back, we're going to kind of move to, another place that, this one really sticks in my craw too. We're going to talk about Ashley Babbitt. And she was the only person that was killed during January 6th. And there's a trial going on. So we'll do that after the break. But first, an absolutely ostentatious profit timeout. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, on YouTube, on X, on Rumble, on Facebook. It's almost like I'm omnipresent, much to the dismay of many, many redcoats. By the way, if you happen to be a redcoat who was a formerly known as a conservative, and see, this is the sticky thing about redcoats. Sometimes they're so skilled at hiding in the Republican Party that it takes a big event, a big whoopsie, a big aw crap for us to notice exactly who they are. And my friends, Saturday on the podcast, I am going to bring one of those to you. And I'm telling you, this is an episode that you don't want to miss. I've been holding on to this sucker for at least a couple months, and man, I just can't take it anymore. I mean, it's been sitting on the shelf, and the time has come, my friends, to show you exactly who a couple of these people are. So we're going to do that Saturday on the podcast. You don't want to miss it. You can find that pretty much anywhere that you get your podcasts or at cowboystatepolitics.com. If you want to be part of the show, we've opened up the phone lines. The number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call if there's something on your mind that you want to opine about. One more time, 307-374-8989. So all of us remember January 6th. How could we not? The Democrats made sure that those two letters and numbers were in every single breath for the last couple of years until they got beaten over the head with it in an election. But a federal judge has finally had enough in the Ashley Babbitt court hearing. It's a wrongful death suit is what it is. And by the way, before we go any further, there was only one person who was killed during January 6th. One. Her name was Ashley Babbitt. There wasn't a single officer killed. There was only one, and she was killed by a Capitol Police officer.
Yeah, please don't confuse her with Lorena Bobbitt.
No. Lorena Bobbitt did something else. We could talk about the justice in that one, but regardless, that guy did something that he shouldn't have done. Just saying. But anyway, Ashley Babbitt, only person killed during January 6th. And I quote, a May 12th court hearing in the Ashley Babbitt $30 million wrongful death lawsuit against the federal government devolved into shouting by U.S. District Judge Anna Reyes, who lambasted Judicial Watch attorney Robert Strict for the second time in 10 days. Now, the judge in this is of the, I don't know what you want to call it, of the thinking of most district judges that you hear about now. But the hearing was scheduled to consider a motion by Aaron Babbitt's former attorney, Terrell Roberts III, who wants 25% charging lien placed on the gross amount of any financial settlement. Judge Reyes rejected Roberts' earlier request for a temporary restraining order combined with the lien. So basically what's happening is you have different attorneys trying to get a piece of whatever settlement comes out of this. Because it's almost a foregone conclusion, though nobody really has admitted it, that there is going to be a settlement here. But on May 2nd, attorneys disclosed that Judicial Watch, which represents Aaron Babbitt and his late wife's estate, had reached a settlement agreement in principle with the Department of Justice. No terms were disclosed, and a final agreement could be signed at any time, but might take weeks to complete. So Roberts represented Babbitt from shortly after Babbitt's wife was shot on January 6th by Capitol Police Officer Michael Byrd. Roberts abandoned the case in late February of 2022, but has been seeking up to 40% of the financial settlement negotiated by Judicial Watch. So you have another leech attorney that's trying to horn in on this whole thing. But the reason why I brought this story this morning is not because of the settlement. It's because of the eventual conclusion that has to come out of this. The Capitol Police were absolutely responsible for killing Ashley Babbitt. It's on video. I mean, Ashley Babbitt posed no threat to this guy, and he just whipped out his gun and shot her. It is no more complicated than that. Now, the Democrats have used this as a cudgel. Not Ashley Babbitt. They won't even mention her name. But they've used January 6th as a cudgel. And there's a lot of Democrats. You can go on on YouTube, and you can find any number of them that say, all the Capitol Police officers that were killed on January 6th. There weren't any. The only person who died during that riot was Ashley Babbitt. And that Democrats won't even utter her name just shows you how invested these folks are. But this is an interesting piece on The Blaze because it exposes the culpability of the federal government, that there is a settlement. And, a lot of lawsuits get settled just because one party just doesn't want to take it any further, and it's just easier to sign on the dotted line and pay. But not this one. This one shows you that the federal government was wrong, that they are going to settle, and that there are other leeches involved in the case. So, I mean, it's fascinating. If you want to read about it, it's up on The Blaze right now. An interesting case, but it exposes a lot of the problems that we have in our judicial system. Another piece of interesting news is the media has been, what do you say? I wouldn't say that they've been, trying to be honest, because that's not what the media does. But they've decided that they're finally going to admit that they knew that Joe Biden was declining. And I don't know how anybody could say that he wasn't. But in a shock report, Jake Tapper has uncovered startling evidence that Biden's decline was covered up by Jake Tapper. And I quote, in a shocking expose, CNN anchor host Jake Tapper has revealed new evidence that Biden's mental and physical decline was covered up for years by none other than Jake Tapper. These allegations regarding Jake Tapper are disturbing, said Jake Tapper. The idea that someone would use their power as a journalist to lie and withhold essential information from the American people is beyond the pale. This Jake Tapper guy, whoever he is, should be ashamed of himself. Once again, the Babylon Bee has told us exactly what all of us already know. That the media has been absolutely complicit in covering up Biden's decline, and not just complicit. I mean, in a lot of ways, they are the ones that made it possible. That they gave him the cover that gave the Democrats the cover that they needed to say that. What was that, Ken?
I said enablers.
Yeah, they're absolutely enablers. Absolutely. Well, now this next piece is a story that I hope that you've heard about, and if not, you've been definitely been I don't know, affected by, and that is the National Firearms Act. Now that's a law that honestly, essentially, it is one big giant tax, but it is the law that prevents you from owning a machine gun, among other things.
And it's full of promulgated rules.
It is full of promulgated rules, and that's how the ATF has operated for years. Well, there was an effort in the House of Representatives to repeal a couple of the taxes, and I know that this is kind of difficult to understand, but the regulations on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, a lot of the other regulations in the National Firearms Act are taxes. In other words, to obtain a suppressor or a silencer, as the media likes to call them, they're not silencers, they're suppressors. But to get one of those, you have to pay a $200 tax to obtain a tax stamp from the federal government.
Yeah, you can actually build your own,
Yes.
but once you build it, you have to apply for the tax stamp, pay the tax, then you have the right to build it, but then you have to mark it in some way to make it, put an ID on it or whatever.
Right.
But,
Series 1 of 1.
yeah.
But the problem here is that the ATF has used the National Firearms Act to absolutely, in most cases, prevent you from obtaining items such as a suppressor. Well, this bill in Congress was going to remove those two taxes. And before I forget, on tomorrow's edition of the program, or tomorrow's show, by the way, it's Open Line Friday, but we're also going to have an interview with Mark Jones, and we're going to talk about this very issue and why the Democrats have, or the Republicans rather, have pretty much caved like they always do. They're redcoats, and that's what they do. So from the cow pie, in an article entitled Bills Lifting Ban on So-Called Silencers, Short-Barreled Rifles Stall in the U.S. House. And I quote, bills that would lift restrictions on firearm suppressors, as well as short-barreled rifles and shotguns, were stalled in the U.S. House committee this week, leaving gun rights advocates livid. There was a firestorm in Washington, D.C. after the House Ways and Committee failed to insert two gun-related bills into its budget reconciliation bill. Mark Jones of Buffalo, that's the guy we're going to talk to tomorrow, said, quote, that amounts to Republicans on the committee breaking their campaign promises related to gun rights, Jones said, setting off a flood of criticism from Gun Owners of America, the National Rifle Association, and other Second Amendment advocates. The lifting, okay, so a lot of these regulations are over 91 years old. Wyoming's Republican congressional delegate John Barrasso and Cynthia Lummis and Harriet Hageman stated on Wednesday that they support the bills. Now, Hageman is not on Ways and Means. She is also co-sponsoring both House bills to lift restrictions on suppressors, commonly called silencers, and short-barreled rifles and shotguns, according to an email statement. Now, this ties into the story that I started the program with in a couple of different respects. Everybody remembers, or everybody should remember, the name Randy Weaver. Randy Weaver was the guy in Idaho that the ATF raided him because allegedly he was selling prohibited items, and it was a sawed-off shotgun that they were going after. Well, the end of it is the FBI and the ATF, they killed his entire family and his dog, and all of it was over 5/8 of an inch. That's what the whole thing was over. Now, leading up to that, an undercover federal agent hounded Randy Weaver for weeks, trying to convince him to sell a sawed-off shotgun. Well, finally, Randy Weaver had enough, and this is no excuse whatsoever, but he did saw off the barrel of a shotgun, and he mismeasured it by 5/8 of an inch, and it was a little over half an inch, got his entire family killed.
Probably, where does that begin?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a slug 2 3/4 inches, for example, is it from back there where the primer's at? Is it where the lands, on a rifle, where the bullet engages the lands? But where exactly do you measure from? I'm sure that's prescribed, but
Yeah. Well,
Easy to
and
mistake.
we'll ask Mark Jones when we talk to him, but from my understanding, it's from the beginning of the breech to the end of the barrel. Well, so that's a sawed-off shotgun. Now, the ban on short-barreled rifles came about during the 20s and 30s with gangsters, right? The whole Tommy gun thing. And of course, Tommy gun is a fully automatic weapon. But it was an effort to curb crime, which we know that gun control never curbs crime. But anyway, the short barrel rifle thing, that's what it was about. And so these laws have continued to where now you still can't have a short barreled rifle, which, by the way, there's a lot of other weapons that are far more versatile and far more deadly than any other short barreled rifle that the law was originally created to prevent.
It's always kind of tickled me that short barreled rifles are right out, but let's say a Ruger Red Hawk 44.
Yeah,
You
exactly
know,
right.
um, it- so many of these laws are arbitrary, and I probably should bring in a couple examples tomorrow. I can show a legal short barrel rifle, but if you attach this to it, it's no longer legal. Or if you have this feature instead of this feature, it's not legal. They're arbitrary. They don't have a thing to do with the lethality of the weapon in question. So we'll plan on maybe a little show and tell tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we should do that. And I'm looking on my little soundbite thing here. I may have. No, I do not. But remind me, and we need to get some of the sound bites from the former director of the ATF, Dettelbach. Most of the people that are writing these regulations, they have no idea what they're talking about. I've got several sound bites from the head of the ATF being asked, what is an assault weapon? And he can't answer the question.
Yeah, they take a look at the weapon.
Yes.
It's
scary,
black and scary looking.
Scary looking weapons, which is exactly what this whole thing is. But anyway, we're going to talk to Mark Jones tomorrow on the program, and we're going to go through this whole thing and explain what the deal is. So we're going to do that tomorrow. Coming up on the program, we're going to do a little fashion news. We don't do that often on the program, but this one's important.
U.S. Coin Capital hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, X, all over the place. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record, my friends, that nobody can possibly compete with. I mean, I suppose if you were a new show and you just started and you did everything right, you did your homework, and you were concerned about the facts, well, then you could probably get to that because that's what I did. But not the cow pie, not the Pravda on the Platte, not any of those. Now, one of the items, I guess the areas of news that we generally speaking, don't talk about is fashion. Now, I mean, Agent 29, you are a fashionable guy. You're the guy that wears many hats.
Cutting edge.
Cutting edge fashion, that's true. And by the way, if you guys didn't know this about Agent 29, he does have a very interesting collection of hats.
Yeah, we might have to share some of those.
Yeah, at my wedding, he wore a top hat, which, by the way, he totally pulled off. So, I mean, fashion is important here at Cowboy State Politics.
I pulled it off because I went indoors.
Well, yes. Very funny. Well, the New York Times is evidently running out of ways to, I don't know, go after conservatives, to attack conservatives in any way, shape, or form. And there's a piece in this morning's paper, and it's in or their website. It's entitled, "Can I wear a sheath dress without looking like a MAGA woman?" So the first question for the uninitiated is, what exactly is a sheath dress? I mean, we're guys, we don't really know, but a sheath dress. Yes, there we go. That's exactly one of those, what Melania Trump wears a lot of the time. And there's been this narrative going on around conservative circles about, that conservative women have a certain look about them.
Well, she could wear a garbage bag and still look good.
Well, that's absolutely true. And the truth, and I don't think it's just my opinion, but conservative women are just hotter. It's absolutely true. You can look at any group of women and you can say, "Yep, I'm sure that one's a Republican." Well, the New York Times has decided to take this to a whole nother level, and I quote, "There is a very specific look associated with women who subscribe to the Trump worldview, one that is sort of a cross between Fox newscaster and Ms. Universe. It generally involves flowing tresses that are at least shoulder length, false eyelashes, plumped up cheeks, lips, high heels, and, as you say, a sheath dress. The effect underscores an almost cartoonish femininity that speaks to a relatively old-fashioned gender stereotype. The counterpart to this woman is a square-jawed, besuited guy with a side part." All right. So this is really an attempt to paint an entire group of people into one category. And the question as to whether or not you can tell a person's political viewpoint from just how they look is the exact opposite of the thing that Democrats have been arguing against for years. In that, how dare you judge me? I can dress and be the person that I want to be, except, of course, if you're a Republican. If you're a Republican, then we can make fun of your makeup. We can make fun of your dresses. We know exactly who you are by how you dress.
You remember Whoopi at the event at the Met or whatever it was?
Oh,
yeah,
God.
and she had a top hat too.
Yeah, she did. Are you saying that you're emulating Whoopi?
God forbid.
I know.
I'm going to burn that top hat.
But the point here is that there's been this, and maybe it's just online, and maybe guys don't notice this, but when the media, when the left attacks conservatives, it is not just the guys. It is the entire gamut. And this is one of the ways in which the left has been going after conservative women. Just think about the all-on broadside assault that they have launched against Melania Trump. All of the things that have been in the newspaper, in magazines during the first presidency, I mean, it was absolutely amazing. And Melania Trump is a supermodel who speaks multiple languages, and yet the left continues to go after her.
You wouldn't remember because of your youth. Jackie.
Jackie Kennedy Onassis.
Yes. Yeah, Jackie was idolized by the press featured everywhere you looked. Um, when you compare the two, and I realize this sounds very superficial, you look on the surface, and here is a supermodel who actually carries herself well, who speaks many different languages.
Yep.
Compare
Brilliant.
that to Michelle Obama, who yelled at us because she was underprivileged while living in the White House with the most powerful man on earth.
Yeah, isn't that just amazing? I mean, the left is completely detached from reality. Listen to this from the New York Times piece. Quote, in any case, the Trump-approved lady look has stayed so consistent that it has effectively infiltrated everyone's cerebellum, and we now have an almost Pavlovian reaction to seeing anyone with flowing hair and false eyelashes and limp plumper in a sheath dress. But here's the thing, of all the visual cues on that list, the sheath dress is the least important. The look of Trump world is increasingly about beauty choices more than clothes. You can see this in Attorney General Pam Bondi, who favors pantsuits, and White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, who seems to vacillate between suits and sheath dresses. No matter what they wear, however, they are never anything but a Trump woman.
It's easier to conceal carry with a suit than a sheath dress.
It is.
I would guess. I haven't tried it.
Now, let me repeat that last line. That quote, however, they are never anything but a Trump woman, even before they get to policy. There is actually a name for how they look, Mar-a-Lago face, after the Trump Golf Club that is home to so many of these sporting the look, which also involves the conservative girl makeup. That's exactly what I was referring to in the beginning. So, and just think about this for just a second. This is how the left views conservatives. They are never anything more than a Trump woman. That is the entire essence of how the left views conservative women. And by the way, Ken, do you know how you can tell the difference between a conservative woman and a liberal one?
Does that mean I'm supposed to cue the music?
No, not at all. But here's the difference. The bulge in a conservative woman's pants is actually a gun. But think about it. It's absolutely true. And these lefties have the gall to attack conservative women. It just shows you how incredibly shallow they are, how they are devoid of any sort of argument, how they can't win it. They don't have anything left. The guy we're going to talk about coming up next, I'll show you a picture of him, and you tell me if he's going to be the leader of the Democrat Party. My friends, we are winning, and in any way, shape, or form, we're going to win so much, and we're going to get tired of winning. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell.
Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307 699 3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307 699 3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
That's right, my friends. Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. Explaining to you every day why the party of hot, intelligent, and powerful women is way better than anything the Democrats can muster. Have you ever noticed this, Agent 29, that Republican women are just hotter? That they are just way more beautiful, way more intelligent than the Democrats?
No, I'm so far above that.
Oh, are you now? Yes, yes.
Never noticed.
Right. But it's true. It's true. Before the break, we were talking about this whole dumb New York Times article. But that's the last that I mean, that's where they're at. They don't have anything more to argue. They don't have anything more to contribute to the conversation. The only thing that they can do is continue to rely on old, tired arguments that never worked in the first place. And one of the at first and second place, one of those is trying to impeach Donald Trump. If you thought the Democrats were going to give up on that, you are sorely mistaken, my friends. From the Daily Wire, Democrat pulls trigger on Trump impeachment, forcing the House to act. And all right, before we even get to this, let me show you who this guy is. His name is Shree. And yes, he is absolutely a member of Congress. Wait until you hear him. Go ahead and play cut number 1, Ken.
Are you afraid that this is going to potentially might help the president, like give him, might having the opposite effect that you're actually trying to get?
Well, look, I'm not so worried about the consequences. I'm just focused on doing the right thing. The question really is, I am not focused on what he will use or not use. If I don't press for this, he will feel that he has a free pass to continue to violate the Constitution. So no matter what, this president will try to take advantage of any situation.
Yes.
But the right thing to do here is call out for his impeachable conduct.
We can't
the right
why
thing
his
to do
argument's
here
wrong.
is
All right, that's
say he has broken the law.
We can't win the
and
argument.
That's what
No. What we have to do is impeach him, throw him out of office, try to conjure something else up, and with no recognition that they already tried this twice before, and it didn't work either of those two times. Well, this complete moron, he's filed articles of impeachment. Let's hear from the Daily Wire. His name is Shree Thaindar, and he has announced that he intended to invoke privilege, which compels the GOP leadership to act on his impeachment resolution within 2 legislative days. It's likely that Republicans will move to table the measure, effectively squashing the effort. Thaindar's impeachment articles, which he unveiled in April, accuse Trump of committing various high crimes and misdemeanors over alleged constitutional violations related to taxpayer funds, deportations, tariffs, DOJ, retaliation against the press, and more. Quote, Donald J. Trump has been committing crimes since day one, Thaindar said during his remarks on Tuesday. After ticking off the focus of his impeachment articles, he also took note of Trump's controversial plan to accept the $400 million luxury aircraft known as the Flying Palace, which, by the way, I don't really think that we should be doing that. But, Trump's the president, and he's going to accept that plane. And apparently it's very nice.
It probably is. I don't know if anybody caught Hannity over the last couple of days, but he traveled over there with Trump. And he was just talking about the immense amount of money, and I couldn't throw a number out there, that these countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, have put into our defense over there. And when you lump it all together, the plane isn't that big a deal. But I still think maybe we should put out a bill to sell the thing.
Yeah.
and along with it, 2 Wyoming jets.
Exactly right. Well, in any case, this Thandar guy, Shri, he just needs to go home. I mean, don't run for office. Don't irritate me. Completely leave me alone. Now, another person that just needs to go home is. Do you know who Jasmine Crockett is? Anybody heard of her? Well, Jasmine Crockett is the new rock star of the left.
No relation to Davy, we presume.
Thank God, no. Perhaps a very, very distant cousin. From the Blaze, and I quote, far left Democrat Representative Jasmine Crockett on Tuesday, let's see here, accused tech billionaire Elon Musk of using his position at the Department of Government Efficiency to profit through his companies. Let's see here. Let's throw this up there, Ken. Ah, yes. There is Jasmine Crockett. Quote, the difference, it was like a complete sham. This was never about government efficiency, Crockett said. The difference was like Doge is nothing but a cover-up. It's a scam, said Crockett while touting her position on House Committee of Oversight and Government Reform. Quote, they made it seem like they were here to do good, but this is really just a matter of a bad guy coming in and saying, hey, I want this contract, that contract. And yes, I have a conflict of interest, but no worries. Oh, and while I'm at it, let me fire this person who, on and on and on and on. There is nothing of substance that comes from the Democrats, which, I mean, I covered this on yesterday's program, that the Democrats don't have any arguments left. They don't have anything left in their arsenal that they can argue against. I mean, they've pretty much used up every logical argument that they possibly have. And the only thing they've got left is obstruction, which they are pretty good at doing.
What they need to do is find them some
It is
complacent
this
white boy.
fear that the people within the party, within the primary system, will have about voting for a woman, because every time we voted for a woman, we've lost so far. And I think that that's a natural fear because we just want to win. So there's a lot of people that are like, you know what? Like, let's go find the safest white boy we can find. I mean, I'm just saying.
There it is.
That's Jasmine.
That's Jasmine Crockett. They don't really care about being able to do anything good for the American people. And it's Jasmine Crockett. And I've got another article here in the stack of stuff. Let's see here, where she's talking about reparations. And I mean, her entire campaign has really been nothing except race. And there she is in the soundbite saying, well, we just want to win, so we're going to find a safe white guy and we're going to run him. Talk about a racist.
Yeah, you can just hear it in her voice, too. She changes. It's kind of like Hillary used to do when she would go visit the South.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of people that are spending tremendous amounts of money and don't want to fix anything for the American people, Ken, you were down at the University of Wyoming this week. That's why I had to run the program on my own.
Well, you did okay, I heard.
Yeah, I think it was fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, I was down at UW, as I mentioned earlier, for budget hearings, where each of the schools, the dean would come and present to the board why they needed more money. There's a lot that could be said, and perhaps we could expand on this at a later time, but one of the people that came up there was the head of the physical plant. So they supervised construction and maintenance of all of the buildings, also had the police department in there. And he was just explaining how they didn't have the money to keep up with everything that they had taken on.
Okay.
And,
how can they possibly not have enough
well, we'll save that argument there. But I want to, if it's okay with you, I want to play a little bit of what I said in response to that, because everywhere I go, I hear the same thing from every agency. We don't have enough money to pay competitive wages. And so
that's everybody's argument.
Yeah. So this is yours truly.
Representative Pendergraft, I think you have a comment.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Craig reports basically say that all across the state revenue is flat at best. And so we at JAC are faced with exactly the same issue that you're faced here. There's a limited scope financially of what we have to deal with. I've spent quite a bit of the last couple of weeks visiting with the judiciary. They have the same thing. How are we going to hire a prosecuting attorney for $60,000? You're not going to do it. And so what we're going to be faced with, the same thing that you're faced with, is looking at the scope of what we're doing altogether. You talked about how vast UW is, and it truly is. In that vastness are a number of elements that you have to do. Constitutionally, you've got an advantage because you are mandated by the Constitution that you exist. There are things that are critical, and those things have to be done well. They have to be done adequately. And so what I think we've done to ourselves as a state is we've got ourselves spread far too thin. We've got ourselves trying to do too many things, and quite frankly, we're doing some of them half-assed. So we need to focus on what are we going to do properly and do it right. I'm very conservative. I don't like spending more money than I have to do. But I'm going to spend the money that it takes to do the job right. Your job is critical. It needs to be properly funded. So then my thought is we look around the rest of the university and say, what is not critical? Nobody wants to have anybody go home or to shut anything down. But that's the facts. One more point is made here.
Continue to grow and continue to get out of hand, and we see all these shiny things on the shelf that we'd love to have. Yeah, we want to do that. But it's like, I've had horses almost all my life. And recently I just decided, you know what, that's not my lifestyle. The horse is the cheap part. And once you get that, you've got to maintain it. And so you've got to take a step back. And I think that's where we're at as a state. I think that's where the university is. And nobody, like I said, nobody wants to tell anybody, hey, we're going to shut you down. But we may well be confronted with that on every level.
There's a lot more that I could say, but you got to understand where I am and who I'm speaking to. So I have to tread a little bit lightly, or I'm just dismissed as a wacko.
Well, Ken, I get that we have to maintain the things that we have. I get that. Okay, you build a building, you've got to maintain it. But at what point do we say enough is enough? I've walked through that campus, and frankly, I was appalled at the amount of buildings, the opulence of the building. I mean, I was walking up a back walkway between buildings. Honestly, it's not one that you could see from Prexy's pasture or really anywhere on the university, unless, of course, you were just trying to get a shortcut to go from, building to building. And there's statues along the walkway. I mean, it was absolutely a shock to me that my money had been used in that way.
Marie Antoinette got so used to her lifestyle that when confronted with the people don't have bread, we'll let them eat the cake. Exactly. And that's a little bit what we're like here at the university. I mentioned the police department. They've got 15 officers and a $23 million budget.
Yeah, absolutely shocking.
And want more.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll cover more on that tomorrow on the broadcast. Open Line Friday. Again, make sure that you don't miss Saturday's installment of the podcast. It's going to be a bombshell, I'm telling you. And for those people who've been waiting for it, it's coming, man. Maybe you ought not talk about me. Anyway, for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson. This is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow.